anger and rage, which in my estimate is one of the most misunderstood instincts. And I mean, we've talked about this as being one of the, you know, it's like it's not allowed, essentially. It's you're not allowed to be angry. It's unspiritual, unkind, uncivil, ugly. And so, you know, in terms of ISA and how anger works, where does rage originate?
Well, you're using the word rage, and that's what Panksepp calls it. So whenever you see the 7 instincts, that when we refer to it, the convention of how you know it's a Panksepp as opposed to just an emotion of rage is because all the letters will be in capital. So it'll be capital R, capital A, capital G, capital E. And that's what you're referring to when you're saying rage. So we are referring to Panksepp's rage instinct. We call it instinct. I think that he calls it an affect center or something like that. But we've narrowed it down to instinct because I think it does what we want it to do when we say instinct. It's something that drives us, because that's Freud's word for instinct. The German word is to drive, like to drive cattle. There's something that's conscious that moves us, and we are not in control of our direction. It is directing what we think about and what we look at and what we focus on, what we remember or what we don't remember.
What is the function of rage in a healthy system?
So one of the things that I get people, they look at me cross-eyed when I say most of these instincts are about connecting to other people. And then we bring up rage and we're like, how is rage connection? Well, rage is designed to keep you connected in community. It's designed to make sure if someone is threatening your position, whether it's physically or emotionally or slandering your character, where it could impact your ability to stay in community, the rage instinct views it all as dangerous. If rage is disrupted because of early childhood adversity, in your psychological and emotional and instinctual system, you will act it out in a way that's not what it was designed for, and then, ironically enough, it pushes you out of community. If your rage instinct has been damaged on the opposite side, that you thought it was more your psyche thought it was more adaptive to not be rageful, to subdue that instinct when it knew it needed to come out, you'll find out that your milquetoast, passive-aggressive attitudes, your taking it out on yourself, it'll come out in your skin, it'll come out in your stomach. There's so many ways that it can express itself, even though you're unconscious of it. You'll find out that it's just the same as if you were just always angry in a maladaptive way. You'll end up hiding yourself from community because of the damage that's constantly being done. You end up out of community and feeling isolated and alone anyways. You know, so if it's affecting, you know, here's one of the things for men. I see this all the time. If that rage instinct is repressed because of an early childhood adversity, a lot of times it shows up, they don't even realize that they're angry or passive aggressive. They just think they're good guys, right? But it ends up, and yeah, nice guys. A lot of times that repressed rage turns up as impotence, because rage is ran by the testosterone hormone. So when that gets, so all these hormones and all these instincts can go either way. They can go what we'd say hyper, or they can go hypo. So you can go hypertestosterone or hypotestosterone. And this is why guys who have impotency problems with their significant other, all of a sudden they start cheating and it's shadowy and whatever, they're porn stars. Right? Because it's this is what we're talking about. It's the emotional quality of the instinct that's actually generating what you think and how your body is wanting to behave in any given situation. So if you don't get this rage thing right, it's going to cause a problem.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, I've been running a men's group for many years, and we've had many different flavors of guys come in. And the ones that there's a particular flavor of gentlemen that I've seen, and I've actually probably been a part of this community too, but men that are very, very, nice, kind. They're very giving. All these things that are very, you're very agreeable, I could say. And what's interesting about that is that they tend to be, you're looking at it physically too, is kind of soft-bodied, maybe a little overweight. They have issues with their significant others, or they don't have any. They're not very successful with women. There's also what I've noticed too, because we have a women's group too, is when those type of men are around the women tend to feel uncomfortable. It's almost like they sense that underneath that surface is just a rat's nest of just uncontrollable energy that's trying to come out, and it comes off as creepy, and they sense that, and there's a lot of, it's interesting. So, so is that kind of characteristic of someone that has a complex around rage, or, what we're discussing?
Okay, so there's lots of things there. Some of it's going to be controversial, and some of it's going to be self-evident when a male or a female hears what we're going to say.
Okay.
The first thing is that here's the most controversial. When a woman is picking up on a man who's got repressed rage, I think that the psyche of a woman, which Carl Jung would call an animus, which is her male, as far as Carl Jung is concerned, despises it. She absolutely despises it. And that's where I've noticed you get the viciousness from the women towards men, and especially men who are who fail to recognize that they're dangerous. So just because you are not physically able to be dangerous, just because you don't look dangerous, or you don't even know how to act on that, it doesn't mean that your passive aggressive stuff or your hatefulness secretly, underneath the surface, while you're what they call simping or whatever, that they pick, the females pick it up, and they want to be aggressive towards it. They want to be aggressive. So the irony is that you're thinking that you've got this strategy that women are going to like, that you are nice and sensitive and emotional, and yet you've repressed everything. So you're unconscious of the fact that you're always being moody and passive aggressive and not acting in life, not engaging with life fully, not meeting challenges head on. It doesn't matter how nice you are. You're never going to get what you think you're going to get from the female by doing that. This is a generalization, and that's why it's controversial. But I find
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I found this to be true, but people will have to figure it out on their own when they hear this, if it's something that they're willing to entertain or not.
Well, and you are kind of pointing back to this idea of there being a larger part of us, an instinctual consciousness, this term we've given it, that's running the show, that's moving and pushing reality itself almost to match or be congruent with its current adaptation, right? Which may or may not be in alignment with how we really, ought to be, or maybe in alignment with who we truly are, like with all of our integrated emotional parts of ourselves.
Yep.
Okay, so, often rage is seemingly, it's often labeled as something negative or pathological, and you kind of spoke on this earlier. Is it really rage that's that way, or is it some form of distortion, and where does that come from?
I think it's 100% distortion. I think what we have done in the West with their traditional therapies and traditional medicine is we have pathologized, meaning we have made it a sickness, what, which is just natural instinctual reactions to bad situations. So, and that's what I'm moving away from. I don't believe that. I mean, if one of the core drivers of who you are is rage, it's not like these instincts are the will to power or dumbness or stupid or that. Like, there's no instincts like that. There's no there's not an evil instinct, right? We didn't find those. He found rage. So, you know, we can say them, you know, so you can understand. So you got rage, lust, fear, care, play, seeking, and anxiety and despair, as I call it. But I think they changed it to panic and
Panic
grief.
and grief. Yeah, panic and grief is another one. Yeah, or it's the
Yeah.
same one, just reworded.
Yeah, I like the word despair because it's far better than grief.
Yeah, so
Eh, but yeah,
a little more punchy.
but we've pathologized all of this. It's something that needs to be treated, and the model we're working on is if you're having a rage issue, meaning the rage instinct has been corrupted prematurely. It's not because it's broken, it's because the environment you were in was broken and there wasn't anyone around to help you with it. That's my primary take on this. And you can see this because I imagine there are people who do have brain injuries, or I imagine that people that could be born with some weird DNA aggressive thing, right? Okay, that's fine, but we're not talking about the average normal person who's suffering from this. And if it was an abnormality or an organic origin, these people would never be able to access it in a meaningful way. And yet, after a few talks, you know, with what we're doing, people all of a sudden are accessing their testosterone. They're accessing the ability to not be impotent. Their skin rashes go away. Their ability to express themselves, protect themselves, to set a boundary, so forth. They're right in front of you, and they are not having a problem. They're not having a problem. And if this was really an organic pathology, then they wouldn't be able to do that. And the other thing is, talk about free association, or Carl Jung's word association. We've turned the word pathology into meaning a physical sickness or a mental illness. The word pathology means the logos, or the mind, the consciousness of emotions. Pathos is emotion. And we've turned it into a sickness. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I was going to ask because obviously we're in a difficult time. I mean, many people, I'm sure even the audience would agree that we're going, you know, nowhere good fast, and you know this epidemic of people being prescribed things like SSRIs and these drugs that seem to me, from my perspective, something that actually suppresses emotion or maybe adds to the problem. What's your opinion on that?
Okay, well, we're going to get into another controversial one. To me, it's not that controversial. You either understand the bottom-up principle that we're working on, or you believe in the top-down principle, or the outer principle, meaning you're just physical matter that's accidental, and if you fix the physical matter, everything else falls into place. That's fine, but that's not why we can do the work that we do, because we're based on a bottom-up. So yes, you can change the chemicals of a person. But the deeper instinctual part that we were talking about earlier, about that affects all of these systems, your emotions, the the immune system, which they call they have a science of this called neuroimmunology and neuroendocrinology. So they understand that this stuff works in the bottom up. The thing is, it's so powerful. Even if you jam the person through with chemicals to bring these hormones up, right? There are women who have the spiral estrogen pill for birth control, right? They still get pregnant. The body, it's kind of like Jurassic Park. You know, they take the gene out so they can't replicate, but then somehow nature decides to figure out an androgynous frog gene where they can procreate without having to have intercourse with the opposite sex. That's how powerful the consciousness of these instincts are. Like you can keep doing it. You can keep turning off the part of your brain that can relate to your emotions, right? You can keep turning that off, but it still finds a way to act out. It still finds a way to be seen, to be heard, because if you can't hear it, it can never get fixed, and your psyche wants you to be whole. Even if you drug it out or you keep it imprisoned, it's always going to be looking for the light. Always.
Well said. Obviously, with the men's work we've been doing, with the work, the group that we've been holding, we get, like I said, we get a lot of people that come in there, and one of the members in particular, kind of someone who I described, like kind of this similar, someone who I would identify as maybe having something around their anger. He described a story when he was very young, and this will give us some real world, I feel like, examples to kind of dive into that will give people, I feel like, something to work with and really see. He has this deportment of hyper kindness. And the stories of his relationships and interactions with people is like almost always the theme is he's getting fucked over in some way. And, you know, when he shows up to the group, he's, you know, he tends to kind of want to give a lot. And if we try to restructure it, he gets kind of easily offended sort of thing. He's always wanting to engage. And, you know, sometimes it's sensitive. It's a very sensitive thing. When he does get angry, it's very quick, and it's over very small things, and you can feel it. However, his behavior is as though he's not angry, right? And if you even try to ask, well, you know, hey, what's this energy? What's the, you know, what's the anger about, right? Like, I want to engage with it, and so we can work this out. It's a very quick denial, like, nope, we're not talking about that, and that's not the problem. The problem is this, or something like that, you know. And it's what's interesting is that he described some early childhood experiences where he witnessed his father abusing his mother, and you know, and just all these things. And when you really piece it together, you could see how. And just from my interpretation, and then I want to hear your take, but he, as a small child, witnessing your mother being abused by the other person that you're dependent on for life, it's like I could see the instinct of anger comes online prematurely and illegitimately, which is one of the ways that we define a complex, how it forms, right, around these energies. The instinct comes online. He's like, he wants to protect his mother. You know, naturally, that primary energy mover is designed to do that. It's like, protect my mother. But he's also trying to protect his mother from the other person he's dependent on. And so this overwhelming energy comes online. It like, you know, I could see it just breaking the psyche of a small child in that instance. And then what's interesting is that, you know, he would describe these situations. He would say that when he was in social situations, that he was very protective of anybody that seemed like they were being unfairly treated. Yeah. Even if maybe there was like joking or teasing, if someone was unfairly treated, he became the, you know, the white knight for this victim, and the anger that would come online was so overwhelming that it would basically ruin the relationships, because he would try to protect. It was almost as though he was trying to reenact and protect the mother with the same energy overload that came online at that time in inappropriate moments. Almost, and I hope that makes sense, but like,
Yes.
and so this whole pattern has emerged in his life. And the interesting thing is that when we actually try to engage with the anger, that this very severe protective, like, we're not going there, comes online. And if you even talk about this, we're going to have a problem, sort of thing. And then usually there's like a, you know, he didn't stick around for the group for a long time, and then he'd come back, and then he'd go, you know, there's this just pattern of like difficult, you know, and I feel like that kind of paints a picture of one form of these issues that can develop around anger. And
we've talked about the instincts, and we've talked about them in the context of how they might act physically in your skin, in your immune system, in inflammation, pain. Arthritic pain is an inflammation issue that could be caused by this, right?
all of which I've had growing up. I had arthritis, all sorts of things.
Yeah, they call the molecule that goes into the arthritic areas, they call it a pyro, which means fire. So it's a very, I mean, they even intuitively knew that this has to do with rage. But so we're talking about all these instinctual, physiological, what in psychology they would call transduction. But what this story points out to me is an important one, and it goes to the top-down cognitive behavioral problem, right? And that is, sometimes, most of the time, you'll find with a rage problem, you'll find that it's not all in the body or all in the system or in the skin or in the arthritis or things like that, or necessarily the relationships. You'll find that it's in what in psychodynamic theory you call projection. You'll find that they project the rage onto other people so they don't have to hold it. This is important because one of the things that a rage complex, which we're calling a psychological complex, right? One of the things that you have to understand, this is why understanding the bottom-up process or pathway is so important. It's not just you have overwhelming emotions and you can't control them. It's that you have overwhelming emotions or you have overthinking things with no emotional content at all. Over-focusing. They're happening
And sometimes
simultaneously.
both, right? Yeah.
Always both.
Okay, always both, yeah.
That's where I'm getting to, because in order for it to do that, it has to dissociate. And this is what we're talking about from the bottom up. If the rage is dissociated from them, which it needs to be in the complex, that means that they are going to simultaneously hyper-focus on you as being the rage. They cannot see it intellectually in themselves. And at the same time, they are being, in their own mind, reasonable and scientific and cognitive and self-aware. They at the same time are dissociated from the fact that they're emotionally in a dysregulated state.
It's funny because you and I were just going through something with me where I was kind of in that state just recently, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is why you can tell someone you are acting out. This is not what's happening in the real world. No one's out to no one's being hurtful. No one, and they literally have no idea what you're talking about. So it's when we try to tell people intellectually to calm down or to reassess the situation, or so what's important is the projection. They're projecting that because they have to be unconscious of it. Whatever their issue is, they have to be unconscious.
Can I ask real quick, is this like So for someone like a child that's witnessing his mother being abused by his father, he's witnessing masculine emotion of rage being expressed through a distorted lens. Basically, his father probably has his own complex around rage, so he's seeing that. He's seeing himself as a part of that, being the son of this father. He's identifying his own rage instinct as wrong. And not only that, but the rage instinct is coming online appropriately at the time to protect his mother, but in a context which can't be expressed or safely dealt with, and he doesn't even have support to help co-regulate. So it's almost as though the psyche, and in order to survive and protect him, makes rage off limits. Like, this is not, like, we need to do something about this overwhelming energy. We need to disperse it before it hits the body. And so it creates, almost on its own, like, this is, we're talking about, like, something that's happening in the psyches of every people. It's like a way to make sure this body-mind complex survives these, you know, traumatic experiences, right? It like deletes and blocks the awareness of the cognition of anger. Like it just separates it completely. So when that anger is happening, which is normal, and it always will, because rage is inherently a part of this instinctual consciousness body that we have, it will come online, but without us being aware, and it must dissociate, it must project or do all these other things, and it's happening completely outside of who we really think we are, because we're like, as a dissociation, we're like trapped in our brains, so we're not even aware that it's happening.
The difference between a healthy rage instinct and one that's in a complex. The difference is that one that's healthy, you are able to stay self-aware during the time. And more importantly, because you're self-aware, there's a part in the brain that when you're self-aware, it remembers things in time and in context. Which means your rage is only dealing with what is happening now. When you're dissociated, when your prefrontal cortex or your ego self-aware cognition is no longer online, when the emotion comes up, the big emotion comes up, when it's not online, we have another memory. It is an emotional memory, and it's not in time. So the complex's job is to get your rage to focus back in time when it was created, out of the context. So when you say our instincts are creating reality, it literally is telling you that you are back, you are 3 years old, you're 5 years old, you're 8 years old, and you feel threatened. And it's literally telling you you are there again. You are not dealing with the reality of what's going on.
Yeah, so in the context of this story that we're using, when he's interacting with people in these social situations and he perceives someone being unfairly treated like his mother was, that anger kicks on as though he was back then with his mother, and that's why it ruins relationships, because it's not happening in real time, it's happening basically in the past. Well, because rage isn't supposed to necessarily come online like that for a toddler, right? It's supposed to develop over time by virtue of like normal human development cycles, right? Like we're not necessarily supposed to be exposed to that kind of abuse and trauma.
Well,
So
I mean, if you tell a toddler that you're not going to talk to them all day long, or you call them stupid because they didn't do something right, that is going to cause a big problem for a toddler. They're going to experience that as almost a mini death. What I'm saying is that the person is experiencing your perceived slight that you've done to them from a toddler position. What we're trying to do is integrate. It's not that your rage won't come online. It just comes online in the appropriate way from a position of authority and from self-understanding. But being a 2-year-old, everything, or being a 3-year-old, being a 5-year-old, everything is overwhelming.
Right.
You need other people. And if those other people weren't there, then you have nothing that can regulate you. if you want to future proof a person, an adult, you can future proof them to be able to relate to others well. Meaning, if they need to be angry, they can be angry, and it doesn't destroy things. It doesn't destroy them. You love proof them. You co-regulate them. You give them lots of connection, lots of love, and that will actually make someone powerful and know how to rage appropriately. It's counterintuitive, but it's how it works. These complexes, though, they hijack the mind, and they hijack other people, and they hijack the reality of a situation. They're actually very simple, because if they're made at the time of a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old or whatever, they're very simple, like a 2 or a 3 or a 5-year-old, and you look at it simply. So, having said that, I think there's something more simple going on. And you'll see the dissociation when I explain this. So when this person we're referring to, when he's in the group, are there mothers around when he's in the group?
Well, not typically. As far as I don't know, maybe there's an anima possessed man or something that's playing.
No, that's not what I'm asking. So we're getting simple. I want to show how simple and dissociative at the same time a complex is. So if you are thinking of 2 or 3 times, and there's probably not a woman there, okay?
Right.
All right. What I'm saying is, it's easy for him to hear. If you were to tell him that he's protecting his mother, it's easier for him to hear that, because that's something his ego can understand, because the complex is not being touched. It's not being touched. What he's dissociated from is not that his mother was afraid of the father, right? I'm not saying she was or she wasn't. I'm saying what he's dissociating from is that he was afraid of the father. So he's projecting now, it's not just a rage issue, it's a fear issue, and he can't have that fear. So his mother has the fear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, too, because he kind of falls into this category of man that, and this isn't meant to be political or red pill versus all these other things, but he would fall on the spectrum of, like, you know, red pill conservative to, like, left-wing woke sort of thing. He's more on this kind of left-wing woke side, where he's very hypersensitive to people's feelings, almost to the point of, like, authoritarian. Like, you better be considerate of these people's feelings, or you're going to experience my rage. But not because I'm angry, but because you're a bad person, sort of thing. It's this.
Yeah, and he's protecting people.
Yes.
Or protecting a virtue or a cause or a. When
in fact, it's him who needed protection and likely needs to feel protected, right?
Yeah, he needs to experience that emotion, that instinct, and he needs to let it, at the same time it's out, he needs to also be taken in by the community, and then that will eventually, he'll catch up to what the rage is supposed to be doing.